Hello everybody, welcome back to the Flicks the Church Forgot, where I'm exploring a whole bunch of releases from a company called Fabulous Films. Now tonight I want to continue this series of shorter episodes which profile some releases from this company who are doing wonders in terms of unearthing some really great old forgotten gems from classic TV. But before we do that, remember you can follow me at Twitter at Rev Peter Laws, or at SoundCloud, where Facebook, the Flicks the Church Forgot. And remember, the show is available as an audio podcast too, if you want to go there. And lastly, my debut novel Purged is about to be released in February, on February the 16th, in fact, in all formats. That's physical book, digital, physical audio book, CD, set, and download. So anyway, that's coming soon. Hope you get a chance to check it out. But for now, let's get hitched. Good evening, and welcome to the 50s and 60s, a time when directing genius Alfred Hitchcock dominated cinematic thrills. This was the time he was making absolute classics like The Birds, Psycho, Vertigo, North by Northwest, but this was clearly not enough for the roly-poly showman. He wanted to not only conquer the large screen, but also the small screen too. And again, Fabulous Films have released the result of this, which is the complete collection of both Alfred Hitchcock Presents, that's 7 seasons of it, and also the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, which was 3 seasons. That is a whole bunch of chills that are locked and loaded and ready for your TV. Now, there are some cracking episodes here amongst this, and scary ones too. For example, like the episode The Glass Eye from Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Season 3, Episode 1. In this, William Shatner tells a heartbreaking and nightmare-inducing story of a lonely woman and a ventriloquist. It's really worth checking out in its entirety, but the ending really kind of gave me a nightmare. The Sign of Satan from Alfred Hitchcock Hour, Season 2, Episode 7, has Christopher Lee being stalked by a satanic cult in Hollywood while... Yeah, it's a little bit silly, but bear in mind that this is Christopher Lee being produced by Alfred Hitchcock in a story that is written by Psycho scribe Robert Bloch, no less, and you're thinking, wow, this is quite a classic trinity I'm watching here. I also really enjoyed an episode called The Creeper, which is from Alfred Hitchcock Presents Season 1, Episode 38. In this, it profiles a housewife who's terrified she's going to be the next victim of a local strangler, and her snooty and obese neighbor doesn't seem to do anything to help her out. Basically, she just keeps coming around the house saying, only bad girls get murdered, dear, so you don't have anything to worry about unless you're a bad girl. It's like, well, thanks. Breakdown is another episode that stands out in the memory from Hitchcock Presents Season 1, Episode 7. I watched that the other night, and William Kalu basically starts off firing some guy and being disgusted by the man's weakness when he cries at being fired. But when Kalu later gets paralyzed in a car wreck and treated like a corpse, even while he is fully conscious of it, he suddenly realizes that maybe he is not quite as tough as he thought either. I'm pretty sure this episode was remade in the 1980s incarnation of the new Alfred Hitchcock Presents. But whatever the case, it's kind of like a pretty dark and intense episode. The bottom line is that this is a show that revels in darkness, especially when polite, well-to-do people end up doing bad, savage things, something that Hitchcock enjoyed. Not all the stories work, of course, and personally I do prefer the consistent horror and gothic focus of shows like The Night Gallery, which I reviewed in the last episode. I kind of like the transcendent themes of that stuff. But these are still solid seasons packed with thrilling tales. The Writers Guild of America once ranked Alfred Hitchcock Presents as number 79 in the top 101 best TV shows ever written. Now, Hitchcock's talking head intros and outros are an iconic treat in themselves, especially when he is so frequently sarcastic about the adverts. He kind of just stands there in the intros and outros and says stuff like, seeing a murder on television can help one work off one's antagonisms, he says. And if you haven't any antagonisms, these commercials will now give you some. Cue a washing powder ad. This kind of constant, piss take of the show's sponsors, I think it's kind of rarely seen in TV. Even today, shows are so scared and paranoid that they won't bite the hand that feeds them. The Simpsons maybe being one of the few exceptions. But here, Hitchcock frequently rips the Mad Men crowd a new one almost every time. So that part of it feels really quite subversive and new. But he does bow to tradition too. since many of the shows end with murderers who get away with it. For example, Miss Ellie, you remember her from Dallas, Barbara Bel Geddes? She smashes her husband's skull in with a frozen leg of lamb in a Hitchcock-directed episode with the appropriate title, Lamb to the Slaughter. That's from Alfred Hitchcock Presents Season 3, Episode 28. Now, Hitch keeps adding these details in his monologue afterwards to these sorts of stories where they get away with it, and he'll say, she was eventually caught and brought to justice. Phew, such crime doesn't pay asides, feel forced. I guess they were like a reassurance to vintage audiences that the moral compass of the show and the network were honestly not as bad as these tales are implying. But I kind of don't know who they were trying to kid. Hitchcock luxuriated in the mechanics of murder, as did the viewers of both his films and his TV work seen here. Fictional murder, albeit, and importantly, but nonetheless they were fascinated by that stuff. So I don't know why they had to shoe in these little, but it's all okay in the end. Maybe that's just a normal thing that people needed. Maybe the advertisers were saying, look, if you're going to rip it out of us, at least don't be so macabre. Maybe they needed that little bit of balance so that people could get some sleep at night. But I don't think that's why these sorts of shows are remembered. For many, it's the fear and the scary aspect of these stories that linger long after. Even Hitchcock's little reassurances in some ways fade away in the mind, and it's the images of the stories that often have their most lasting power, and many of those images are dark images. Now, we all know that people are well into box sets these days, but if you put these two bad boy box sets together, you are talking about a hardcore TV watching experience. This is 59 discs in total, clocking in at 11,167 minutes. That's 366 episodes all added up, so this could be your daily watch for the rest of this year. Or, of course, you could always just binge eat them all in one sitting, which will take you just under 8 days without pressing stop. Well, listen. That's it for this episode. Join me next time when I'll be looking at just a few more releases from fabulous films, including an anthology horror from the 70s with a man having an affair with a tree. But until then, do share and subscribe, follow me on Twitter at Rev Peter Laws, and check out SoundCloud and iTunes for the Flicks the Church Forgot audio podcast, and do look out for my novel Purged as it comes out in shops the 16th of February. But until then, don't forget the Flicks the Church Forgot. And with that, I bid you good night.